Taking the conversation to South Africa now, less than a day after South African President Cyril Ramaphosa cut short a crucial investment promotion visit to the United States to deal with an escalating electricity crisis on the home front, 3 long-delayed independent renewable power producer contracts have been signed by the country. According to Minerals and Energy Minister Gwede Mantashe, South Africa's energy crisis is a part and parcel of a global problem. The first projects are not expected to come online before the end of 2024.
Well, South Africa's state-owned power utility, Eskom, which has for decades held a monopoly on power production and distribution, currently generates a daily average of 26,000 megawatts of electricity against national demand of 32,000 megawatts, according to widely cited figures. Well, now to discuss further on the power issues in South Africa, we have joining us this morning energy expert Tshepo Kgadima. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Very good morning to you, and
good morning.
Thanks for inviting me.
All right, let's go straight into it. Now, is this good news or what? South Africa about to change from being a problematic situation to being something good, where you have the president who has made a return to actually sign these new contracts. Tell us about it.
Now, the return of the president from the United States, or from the trip where he was scheduled to appear or to deliver a speech at the United Nations, is nothing but a public relations stunt. But it's a public relations stunt that is making a mockery and is being facetious about a very serious situation. But if to answer your question directly about the 3 contracts that were signed yesterday with the so-called independent power producers on wind energy, there is nothing independent about them. They depend on Eskom, and they depend on government guarantees, but they have got no obligation whatsoever to deliver any electricity usable to anybody else. And they therefore are only going to make what is already a serious situation even more dire, in the sense that every single intermittent energy source, wind or solar specifically, they require 100% backup. So the backup that is required will be from the baseload coal-fired power stations of Eskom. The reason why we are going through load shedding now, notwithstanding that we already have got 6,000 megawatts of installed so-called renewable energy on the grid, that is the cause of our problems. That's why we have got the load shedding crisis that we have, because when you listen to the announcement made by Minister Mantashe yesterday, he never once, or his people never once mentioned, well, what is the efficiency as well as the availability of this so-called power in terms of how many megawatt hours, saying that the capacity, so X megawatts are going to be generated, is not sufficient. It is not even 10% of the equation. So you have to ask, he says, well, how many megawatt hours are going to be produced? And once you ask that question, you will come to a conclusion which we should have come to a long time ago, that there is no business case whatsoever for any intermittent energy source to be put on the national grid of the country. And for as long as we do that, we end up with the situation of fruitless and wasteful expenditure, which currently is in the order of 10 million US dollars every single day that South Africa loses paying out money to the so-called independent power producers who purport to produce renewable power, which is never deliverable anywhere else. But the cost to Eskom is over $10 million a day. Right. And that is a situation that should have been averted and not sign on more onerous, more costly contracts, as currently has been the case.
Tshepo, if you remember, as far back as in 2016, former President Jacob Zuma did, promise, a complete end to load shedding. But over time, that hasn't changed. So can you help us understand what the challenges are with Eskom? There have been corruption allegations and whatnot. Where do you think the major problem is with Eskom? And you've also mentioned President Cyril Ramaphosa returning back to the country is nothing but playing to the gallery. It's nothing, that will produce any results. So where really would you say the problem is from?
Well, the problem is this. Back then, when President Zuma or former President Zuma made the announcement that load shedding was a thing of the past, we have to take this into account. Eskom at that time has shut down 10,000 megawatts equivalent of capacity, units that they completely shut down, but they shut those units down on the premise of trying to cut down CO2 emissions. So that is on the one element. But from that time to date, the number of units that have been inexplicably shut down are in excess of 15,000 megawatts. Bear this in mind. South Africa has got installed capacity, or specifically Eskom, has got over 51,000 megawatts of installed baseload power, as well as what they call peaking power in terms of open cycle gas turbines, 2 power stations that we operate, as well as nuclear. So when you look at that, it's 51,000 megawatts. The demand in the country, as you've spoken, it is no more than 32,000 megawatts. But with 15,000 megawatts that have been shut down, with another 5,000 megawatts that has been that is on maintenance, that is what is causing the problem that we have currently of load shedding. Notwithstanding that the 6,000 megawatts of the so-called renewable is on the grid, but is causing more harm, and hence we are having rolling blackouts as we currently are. So what is required? What South Africa needs is management at Eskom, is the board of Eskom, is a cabinet that is competent, is a cabinet that and management that must be knowledgeable and have the requisite expertise and skill to be able to manage a power system such as that of Eskom. Because once you have that in place, the solution for South Africa will be, instead of saying over the next 2 years we are going to build more intermittent power in form of solar as well as wind, you should bring back to service the 15,000 megawatts. We can bring back successfully 9,000 megawatts of power which has been shut down from baseload coal by deploying higher efficiency, lower emissions, clean coal technologies whereby there will be zero emissions, and at the same time provide this country with energy security, because then you will have dispatchable energy, and it's only with dispatchable energy that you are in a position to be able to solve the crisis that we have and give this economy a chance to be able to grow, because energy security is foundational to the growth prospects of any economy anywhere in the world. And to eradicate energy poverty, South Africa right now is enduring energy poverty.
All right, Tshepo, let me just cut in very briefly, just one last question. I mean, you've spoken a lot, you've given us a clear indication of what is really happening, but it seems that the enterprise, public enterprise minister, Gordon, as well as the minister himself, talking about Gwede, are at loggerheads, even with the president. And it seems that this is as a result of the fact that many are saying, Ramaphosa is saying that there's a lot that is supposed to be achieved, that he is supposed to achieve. And the public enterprise minister is also saying that there's a lot that Gwede is also supposed to achieve. So tell us, is there any form of disagreement that's affecting the load shedding problem right about now?
Look, what we continue to see coming out of cabinet and led by President Ramaphosa, his Minister of Public Enterprise, Gordon, as well as the Minister of Energy, we see nothing but verbose hyperbole that is full of rhetoric, but is going to signify absolutely nothing. If anything, it's only exacerbating what is already a dire situation. What this country needs, it needs people who are competent and that know the basics, the basic elements. What they are trying to do now is to rewrite the laws of physics. And if indeed it was possible for them to rewrite the laws of physics by successfully putting onto a high voltage grid intermittent power without causing any harm to the grid, that is the stuff of the Nobel Peace Prize. They should have been given a Nobel Peace Prize in science because they successfully rewritten the laws of physics. It is absolutely not possible. So we are, unfortunately, as an economy, are going to continue to experience rolling blackouts, which are not only financially ruinous on Eskom, not only exacerbating energy poverty, but economically they are going to continue to be catastrophic, because the knock-on effect from lack of energy has resulted in what we are seeing, the economy that is shrinking, energy-intensive industries that are no longer making any investment into this economy. And those are the problems that are facing this nation. But I wish I could say to you, there is a rainbow at the on the horizon, but there is no rainbow at all. In fact, there's very storms that are coming our way economically as a nation because of energy insecurity.
Tshepo.
And the politicians are incapable of making the right judgment calls.
Tshepo, it's a very interesting discussion over there in South Africa, and we hope that there's some light at the end of the tunnel for South Africans. Thank you so much for your time this morning, and looking forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you. Let's hope the oncoming light you are referring to is not an oncoming train, but is a light at the end of the tunnel of a very dark cloud.
Absolutely.
Thank you.